This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick.
So this is the one that Morgan was really excited to join us for, Chapter 27.
Yes.
What really is, I would say, the origin of Egwene's Amerlin Seat run.
Yeah, you can really feel it as Swan is talking with the Aes Sedai.
Just want to say, hey, again, we've got Morgan joining us for another episode. We had a lot of fun with the last one, and just bringing her back to finish up this little scene for us and keep correcting us because she's been doing a great job so far.
Yeah, I'm already digging it. We've got to do this again sometime.
Aw, this has been so much fun. I really enjoy it.
Well, we're about to break into Chapter 27 of the Fires of Heaven, the practice of diffidence, and our symbol is the flame of Tarvalon.
I assume it's just Suian who's trying to practice the dissidence?
Yeah.
Diffidence.
Yeah, she doesn't know how to be diffident.
She's practicing both, really.
This is true. That's a fair point. She's being diffident with the dissidents.
Oh, I like that.
That's deep, man.
Maybe it's causing her some cognitive diffidence. Damn it. Just read us in before I make a bigger fool of myself.
You are rudderless, Swan told 6 women facing her in 6 different sorts of chair. The room itself was a muddle. 2 large kitchen tables against the walls held pens and ink jars and sand bottles in neat arrays, mismatched lamps, some glazed pottery, some gilded, and candles in every thickness and length stood ready to provide light at nightfall. A scrap of Ilioner silk carpet, rich in blues and reds and gold, lay on the floor of rough, weathered planks. She and Liane had been seated across the piece of carpet from the others, in such a way that they were the focus of every eye. Open casement windows with panes cracked or replaced by oiled silk let a breath of air stir in, but not enough to cut the heat. Swan told herself that she did not envy these women and their ability to channel. She was past that, surely, but she did envy the way that none of them perspired. Her own face was quite damp. All that activity out there is play and show. You might be fooling each other, maybe even the Gaiden, though I wouldn't count on that were I you, but you can't fool me. She wished that Morven and Beonin had been added to the group. Morven was skeptical of everything, despite her placid, sometimes vaguely absent look, a stout brown with gray-streaked hair who demanded 6 pieces of evidence before she would believe fish had scales, and Beonin, a pretty gray with dark honey hair and blue-gray eyes so big they constantly made her appear slightly startled. Beonin made Morven seem gullible. Elaida has the tower in her fist, and you know she will mishandle Rand al'Thor, Swan said scornfully. It will be pure luck if she doesn't panic and have him gentled before Tarmin Gaiden. You know that whatever you feel about a man channeling, Reds feel 10 times more. The White Tower is at its weakest when it should be at its strongest, in the hands of a fool when it must have skilled command. She wrinkled her nose, staring them in the eye one by one. And you sit here, drifting with your sails down. Or can you convince me that you are doing more than twiddling your thumbs and blowing bubbles? Do you agree with Swan, Liane? Anaya asked mildly. Swan had never been able to understand why Moraine liked the woman. Trying to get her to do anything she did not want was like hitting a sack of feathers. She did not stand up to you, or argue. She just silently refused to move. Even the way she sat, with her hands folded, looked more like a woman waiting to knead dough than an Aes Sedai. In part, I do, Liane replied. Swan gave her a sharp look that she ignored. About Elaida, certainly. Elaida will misuse Rand al'Thor, as surely as she is misusing the tower. For the rest, I know you have worked hard to gather as many sisters as you have, and I expect you are working just as hard to do something about Elaida. Swan sniffed loudly.
I think that the reason that Swan doesn't want Morven or Beonin in the group isn't just that they're skeptical. She has common ground with the other 4. Like, she and Anaya are the same Ajah, so they have the same goals. They have the most to lose with Elaida in the White Tower. You know, none of the blues that stayed in the tower lived. They were all dead. They all, the ones that did live had to flee. And then she was novice and accepted with the other three, with Carlinia, Mirel, and Sheriam. And there's like a mess up with the timeline, because it says that Mirel was accepted or novice during the Aiel War here, but in New Spring she's an accepted with Swan and Moraine, so they got the timeline mixed up, but I don't think that it really matters.
Maybe she started as a novice and got raised to accepted by the end of it?
Possibly. I know that she was helping Moraine and Swan with their test. Regardless, it doesn't really matter. But she's got all of this like information on the other four that she can use to manipulate them. She knows them in a way that she doesn't know Morvern and Bayanin. And I think that that's one of the reasons that she's unhappy that they've joined the group.
Good observation. I would never have picked that out.
Bayanin actually, once Egwene is captured, she convinces herself that she doesn't have to be loyal to Egwene anymore, and she can be loyal to Elaida. And she actually goes to the White Tower and betrays the rebels and teaches Elaida traveling.
Bayanin is Elaida's mole.
Ooh, I forgot about that.
Elaida specifically sent Bayanin to Salidar to try to get the rebels to come back. And one of the reasons that it kind of blows up in her face when she returns to the tower after Egwene is captured is that Elaida is pissed at her that she didn't succeed. So she sent her there, and she's joined this group, this council, in the hopes that she can talk them back into the tower. And I think she's doing this beneath the surface kind of power struggle with Sheriam, whose job as a Black Sister is to keep this conflict going on and keep everyone in Salidar.
I'm also glad you brought that up, because I did want to talk about Sheriam's motivations here. Again, dark friend alert. But, and gosh, I really want to add that I was so upset when I found out Sheriam was Black Ajah, because I really liked her. And just her character and appearance and everything.
Oh, I thought that was perfect when she was Black Ajah. I was like, that fits the story so well.
Oh, I felt so betrayed, which makes it good storytelling.
Exactly.
But her motivations here are a little nebulous, but I think you're totally right, Morgan, when you say that probably what she's supposed to be doing here is making sure that they continue fighting. To keep the tower divided, to keep them at each other's throats, and this way, when Tarmangaiden comes, they'll be unprepared and literally killing one another, rather than fighting the shadow.
Yes, her task is to keep the rebels together. She's basically doing good because that's her job, to keep this, like, division, this schism going, and even though...
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, the tower needs to be whole, and it's very much like the Forsaken want the tower split. And so it's sort of like Alviarin's job at the tower is make Elaida make all these mistakes as Amyrlin and split the tower apart from the inside by making the Ajahs fight. And then Sheriam's job as a Black Sister in Salidar is make sure that the rebellion stays. Don't let them go trickling back. Keep them organized, keep them together, so that the tower is weak and split.
Absolutely, and I feel like that's such a good cover, because it would be so believable if someone like Sheriam was there and, you know, even if the White Tower wanted to reconcile and have a meeting, which I don't think ever happens, but even if they did, to be a person amongst the leaders who's saying, no, like, they broke all sorts of laws, they did murder inside of the tower, their actions were reprehensible, we shouldn't deal with these people. It's such a good cover, because you can keep that up, and it's just believable. It's very believable that you would be angry. Of course you would be angry, you know?
I'd like to point out in this scene, Robert Jordan describes the chairs that each of the Aes Sedai are sitting in, and the one that Sheriam is sitting in, the chair back behind her fire-red head was incongruously carved with what seemed to be a mass of snakes fighting. And it's like this wonderful picture, I think, of like what's going on in her head, like all of her motivations and loyalties, because she's honestly a really shitty dark friend. Like, she's not a bad person. I don't think she really wants to hurt people, she became a dark friend to get ahead. And you have to think about, who did she want to get ahead of? Who was she competing with? And it's like, so who was she second best to in the tower? Moraine and Suian.
Yeah.
I really wish that we got more from her point of view. The only things that we get from her POV are when she's in, like, distress. And so situations where everything's very immediate and you're not hearing her, like, analyze her actions. And it's kind of disappointing because I'd like to know more. I'd like to hear envy from her point of view, or just whatever it was that kicked her over that edge. And so, literal red flag sitting in the evil chair. That's obscure says.
Right. I mean, if you can have any more, like, is this person a dark friend? Let's put serpents over their head. I wonder if they're evil. Yeah.
And a giant arrow on top pointing down.
Right, exactly. It's like, this person is awful. I don't know. Maybe we should trust her with the politics of the Little White Tower and put her in charge. That seems right to me. But she always seemed to be more interested in power than evil. And she'll do whatever it takes to get that power, but, she's doesn't want to hurt people, but if that's what it takes, she'll do it.
Like Morgan said, we find later that Shiriam never expected to actually have to do anything to serve the Dark One. It was just like a secretive organization that she joined that professes to be in line with the Shadow, but that's not really that important. Like, the world isn't
like
ending.
The Skull and Bones?
There's no... Right. And just a way to get a leg up, a secret society.
How many generations of Black Ajah just got to get some extra power, and do some fun stuff? Like, she didn't expect to be here during the last battle. That wasn't her goal. She wasn't trying to be like the leader of the last battle when the world turns over. She's like, no, I want a leg up.
Joining the Freemasons to get a promotion at work because you hang out with your boss on the weekend. Like, it's not inherently evil, It's a little shady, but it's not like...
It's like smoking on a break to talk to your boss, because that's the only time anything actually gets done is during smoke breaks.
Yeah, like that.
And then ends up having just terrible unintended consequences.
On her way through the common room, she had snatched glimpses of some of those parchments being examined so assiduously. Lists of provisions, allotments of timber for rebuilding, assignments for wood cutting and repairing houses, cleaning out wells, nothing more. Nothing that looked the least like a report on Elaida's activities. They were planning to winter here. And I'll just leave it there. But this is kind of where I see in this scene Swan's righteous anger is coming from. She's like, what are you doing? Well, you got all these women together, but what are you doing?
Nothing. We're going to sit here.
You're just hanging out, sipping tea? Like, that's your plan? And that's where her emotions are coming from, I feel. She wants there to be a captain of the ship, to use a Swan-like analogy.
Well, yes.
And nobody's moving this forward to, where are we going? What are we doing? We're just drifting.
Yeah, they've sort of made a mistake, but they're well on the path to reconciling and just being like, well, I guess we'll just give up the Blue Ajah and become part of the White Tower again? I don't really know.
Yeah.
Or just people will start to drift back, and it will happen enough that everybody's just kind of shrug their shoulders and be like, what is there to be done about it? Especially as Tarmangaiden gets closer and closer, and the signs start happening where people start, seeing the dead, and there starts to be more thinning between reality and more bubbles of evil, and it's just sort of like without any kind of like organization or fortitude. It's just sort of what's to be done, kind of like a teacher's strike. That's what Daedalus says. So I feel like her anger is understandable, but at the same time it's kind of like the Ajahs have never had common goals beyond like quote unquote fight the Shadow or keep the tower looking like it's, powerful and hold up the dignity of the Aes Sedai or everything. So it's sort of like not precisely fair, I feel like, to be so angry at them. I feel like just having stuff squared away enough where everybody's going to get fed and stay warm is not too bad.
It's certainly important to make those plans first. And, I mean, Swan is obviously super personally and emotionally invested in this, And she may also be reacting to just the fact that nobody else seems to be as angry as she is or as motivated to get up and fight. Certainly not as much as she is.
Yes, no one else seems to be as invested, and I don't know, I mean, maybe part of it is just because she was personally hurt so deeply, but part of it, once again, I think is her own fault. She kept the fight to herself, she didn't, and I've always wondered kind of like how quickly after she informed the Hall of the Tower about Rand having taken Kalendor, did they convene and get her out of there? I don't think it took very long.
Did she even get a chance to notify them? I thought she was deposed before she could say anything to them.
No, she told them. I'm pretty sure she told them.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're right. You were hiding this from us, and she's like, not really. I told you as soon as I knew.
Well, I think she told them, and then it was like Elaida showed evidence to be like, oh, she knew about this way beforehand. It wasn't just she got like a pigeon saying, oh, hey, somebody pulled Kalendor. It was like she was running this behind the show for a long time and she never told you guys about it. But Elaida also went behind the scenes and talked just to the sitters she thought would support her, which was, of course, underhanded and why it was a coup.
And that there weren't sitters from every Ajah in the hall when the vote was cast, and it just wasn't done with the correct decorum. It was done with a sense of urgency and the kind of obvious...
you had a Forsaken in there.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Just casually making decisions for the tower. It's like, oh yeah, Forsaken, good. Messana, thanks, Denel. And I wonder, I don't think there ever, without the Black Ajah and the Forsaken support, obviously I don't think there ever would have been enough support to get Elaida elected as keeper. I think it's partially why you have such a crazy break. The tower splits, mostly because you have this incredible political will that's like, it doesn't make any sense. It's against the common wisdom to take her down because she was a fine Amerlin, and it was only this black-supported minority that was able to it's an extreme group that took her out.
Yeah,
it was really sneaky and underhanded, and I think that because it was like that, because there was force of arms behind it, that was one of the reasons why so many sisters were like, whoa, Nelly, and they all ran, and then just kind of like, what are they going to do after the fact? Well, let's regroup and talk about it maybe, and then they're still kind of sitting in Salidar discussing it, and they're trying to, at this point, to talk themselves back into going back when Swan tells them about Logain and the Red Ajah.
And that really does seem to put a nail in the coffin of them going back, however true it may or may not be.
Agreed.
I agree with that.
Aradia says that's also part of the plan that Beanin was doing. Yeah, she had been sent to get them to come back. I think that she was probably struggling with Shiriam, maybe beneath the surface, just trying to talk everyone home, or at least to help stagnate it, not realizing that was kind of the whole point. Yeah, this put a nail in it. This politicized it in a way that meant that, oh, hey, we have to do something. Where before they were just kind of wringing their hands like, yeah, this was bad, but... And then now they're like...
Right, and probably arguing in circles. Especially, I'm glad that you and Aradia brought that up, that we have Shiriam here, as we were talking about in the last episode, whose goal is almost certainly to keep the tower separate, broken, or at each other's throats. And then you have Elaida's, and I'm sure there are other Black Ajah plans too. And then you have Elaida's plans, who are trying to get the women from Salidar to come back to the tower. And at this point, until Swan arrives, they're just arguing themselves silly, and nobody has made any decision.
It's true. There's also, I forget a timeline for when they show up, but a number of the sitters that they end up electing in Salidar are sent from the White Tower, like the heads of their Ajahs send them, basically like, go stall things out, try to get them to come back. And so that's kind of a thing too. It's like Salidar is full of moles from the tower from the beginning.
Well, and isn't that why there's so many young sitters? Is because the idea is, well, we'll put all these temporary sitters in place just until we reunite the tower. These aren't supposed to be permanent. They're just like...
It's symbolic.
People who are going to be replaced as soon as we get the tower back together. And that's where Suian is like, what are all these young sitters doing? And it's like, well, there was sort of a plan between... Was it the Ajah heads? No, it was...
I think it was the Ajah heads.
Was it the Ajah heads? Yeah, it was the Ajah heads who made that plan.
I know that Jesse Bilal, who was the head of the Brown Ajah in the tower, was pissed off because Janya was one of the sitters who left without being told and went. And so she was really mad about that.
Got it. So the Ajah heads were sort of planning out who was going to be a sitter so that when the tower reunited, they would be able to essentially pick up where they left off without losing a lot of experienced sitters. They just want they were like, oh, well, we'll just take the young and experienced sitters out and give it back to the experienced sitters, and that'll be fine.
Elaida is asking if Jesse's the green head. No, she's head of the brown. There's a bit of internal narrative from Nisun Bahara where she's venting about how pissed she was that Jesse was basically like, you're going to go on this trip to kidnap the Dragon Reborn. I do be a terrible brown. You're okay. There's nothing wrong with you.
You're wonderful, Elaida.
However, again and again, you continue to impress me, Morgan, with your encyclopedia knowledge of this series. Because I believe you, but you just named off 3 Aes Sedai. I don't even remember.
Encyclopedia Grey. Does anybody remember those children books? Encyclopedia Brown.
I've been so involved in the conversation, I haven't looked at the book in a minute. I'm like, wait, where are we?
Get some cute background information on Carlinia from Swan's mind, but I don't feel like that's super important to touch on. And basically, this is where, in this conversation, the sort of thread starts up where the Aes Sedai are saying, Swan, listen, we respect you, we have your back in the future, but you're not an Aes Sedai. And you're not the Emerald Seed anymore. You can't march in here and start telling us what we're doing wrong. You don't have a position here. Just check here. Shiriam nodded. Be that as it may, even that was not sufficient for the penalty given, nor should you have been tried in secret without the chance to defend yourself. Never fear that we will turn your backs on you. We will see that you are both cared for, which Leanne says thank you. Swan grimaces. And she says, essentially, you haven't even asked me about the eyes and ears I can use. Swan's, very much in battle mode here. She's like, you guys are idiots, and as dismissive as you want to be, you're throwing away excellent tools. And I feel like a lot of the next couple of pages conversation revolve around that sort of point, where the Aes Sedai are saying, well, you're not an Aes Sedai anymore, and Swan is saying, yes, that's correct, but, you have an excellent tool in front of you, and I'm not going to let you put me in a cottage with a servant to be forgotten.
Yeah.
You might as well use it. And at one point, she even yells at them, use me, you fools. I have all this power. I have all these connections. I ran the best spy network in probably the world, except for maybe the Shan-Chan, for most of my adult life. What are you doing dismissing me? Look at the position that you're in. You don't have any resources.
Yeah, and also, you don't have Ildeen here, which Ildeen later is super upset with Swan for ratting her out and giving away her position. She's throwing out there all of this information to basically manipulate them into letting them know, hey, I've got all of this information, let me make use of it. She's really very, very clever. It's almost like in dealing with Duranda Tharn and Lugard, having that, innkeeper bully her and realizing there was nothing she could do about it, and if that lady wanted to kick the shit out of her, she'd be screwed. She had to do this whole, mental math in her head and think, okay, what tools do I have at my disposal? How can I make them see me as basically helpless so that they will take what I have to offer just on its merits, and then I can use that to get them where I want them. she does a really good job of it, but they also make it easy because they have this thought that, anyone who's not Aes Sedai is immediately, less, weaker, stupider. Their blind spot that is just their downfall.
They're dismissive of anyone who isn't a full Aes Sedai. And, I mean, much to their peril later, because I feel like Suan eventually accepts that they will dismiss her and starts using it against them. That they won't pay attention to her, and we were talking about this in the last chapter, that they refuse to acknowledge her as an important person anymore, and that is what gives Egwene this excellent weapon against them, this highly skilled woman, and whether or not she can channel doesn't really matter. When I was reading this conversation, I just kept thinking over and over that they are so stupid. Like, why wouldn't you use her? And at some point, like, one of the Aes Sedai, threatens and says, yeah, you know all the names, and, you have access to the not just the network of spies that the Blue ran, but also the Amyrlin's personal spies. And Suan was quite good at this by herself, so she had a highly developed network. But, okay, so you're going to capture her, torture her until she tells you all the names, and now you have to hire, a whole freaking staff to sort through the names, get in touch with these people. Why? And not only that, why would you waste all that time? But you know that this woman is on your side. She will never turn over to the other side. Her loyalty is guaranteed. It's so stupid to question her.
I think that Morvran is more hesitant than everyone else because Morvran is probably the one closest to seeing through her bullshit. She has, I think, the least ambition of any of them. She's brown, she's a bit of a space case, she's the oldest. She just, and I think she's the one who kind of, looks at her sideways. She gives her the longest kind of perusal, and in the end, she falls for it, but I think she almost doesn't. So that's why she's inclined to be no, you're going to give us all these eyes and ears if we want them. And it takes her a long time to nod and be okay, we're not going to take them away from her. But she strongly considers it much longer than the others do. And also, for Lyanni's eyes and ears in Tar Valon itself, kind of makes me think about... I was watching Downton Abbey recently, and it's the lady of the manor has her lady's maid, doing her hair, and she stops to ask her, how are things downstairs, inquiring with the servant about general, politics of what's going on among the servants, because their entire culture and everything that's happening down there is different, and things can go on that the upper crust people don't know about. And so it really actually is quite wise because it's right under your nose and you could never know. So it's really brilliant on Lyanni's part to have all those eyes and ears there.
Lyanna actually says that at some point when she brings up that she has her own network of agents in Tar Valon itself, and she says something like, I always thought it foolish that we paid more attention to the mood of Abu Dar or Bandar Iban than the mood of our own city that we live in. And that's why she has a spy network was all around them all the time.
Yeah, it's really brilliant, and it's a great way to run things and just make sure that morale is good, and it just keeps the Aes Sedai stronger because it makes sure that their home city is stronger, that their people are stronger, that everything runs more smoothly, and it ends up being a valuable tool. And it's awesome to see, later on when she's in Teleron Riyadh, seeing these signals that her agents do where they, paint the door if they're in or the table's blue or whatever, and so she sees all the signals and gets her responses, and it's real subtle, brilliant things that they do that I always enjoy, all those little details. I
do too. That's why the series is so great. It is perfectly detailed in that way.
It really is.
I feel simultaneously realistic and difficult for me to understand that you're going to try to manipulate events in Abu Dar on the other side of the world, basically, but you don't even know what the hell's happening in the inn down the street. What? If you can't control your own city. then you don't really have any business manipulating other people's cities.
Look at what happens in D.C., right? Like, I mean, you have a whole federal government there that doesn't control the city itself. There's a city government, and then there's a federal government. And Congress does have some input into that, but that's not, like, a good thing.
I have a friend that lived in D.C. for a long time, and he actually used to complain to me a lot because he said basically the way that it works is that, like, the federal government has enough control over what happens in D.C., or in name, that the, like, local authorities are not very effective, so city planning is awful, essentially is what he says, because the federal government is concerned with administrating the whole nation and manipulating events around the world. But what that actually leads to is like really terrible roads and bad phone service, and because there's just not enough resources put into it. And I feel like that's a great demonstration of what Leanne's talking about. Like, you got to take a personal hand in your surroundings, not just the whole world.
Yeah, you got to know your people if you want to function properly.
You gotta have your house under control before you go out into the world and try to.
The next thing I have is her story about Logain. And I am convinced that there's some truth in this, even if she doesn't know it. Everyone seems to be disagreeing with me, but I really do think that she hit the nail. I think she hit the nail on the head. I think the Black Ajah was manipulating the red to create false dragons. And I think maybe she made it up, but the more I read her interactions with Logain, I have to wonder if maybe she's just bending the truth a little bit, but it seems like maybe there were some late night talks. And she was hiding them from Min, and since we see this all through Min's POV, we can't know what she actually talked to Logain about.
That's what I suspected, but I'm not certain that she's not making it up. I can't say one way or the other.
In the next book, when Logain is talking to nobles and telling his story, he mentions Barasine in particular, one of the Red Sisters, and I always wondered why she got singled out in particular. She's not a particularly important character. We see her at the beginning of book 11 because she's involved in like the capture of Egwene, but it doesn't really seem like, why would they pick her in particular? Why would Elaida give him her name? So it could very well be that there is truth to it. It's said that it's a lie, but maybe there are some lies and some truths. So you may have a point.
Yeah, and it's not so much that I think they're lies. Is like, I do believe Suian made it up, but I think she may have just coincidentally been correct. And I don't know. I don't know how much Logain told her. I don't know how much Logain is telling the truth. We never see from his POV what he thinks about the Red Sisters. We just see what he tells people, which is obviously manipulating.
Which is a little disappointing.
That makes me wonder a bit if these late night conversations were a bit like when, you and your friends get caught in some mischief in grammar school and they make you all sit in the office outside the principal's office for 20 minutes before you can go in and be questioned individually. And so you're sitting out there and you're like, all right, guys.
What's our story?
Let's figure out the story right now. And you what happened? Like, we need to have our story straight, Then, like I just demonstrated, even children are smart enough to do that. Definitely did a bunch of that in my boyhood. And is that maybe what happened between Swan and Logain, where she said, I think this was a likely looking story, and Logain might be like, well, I wasn't there at this time, and she was like, well, maybe you were here, and he's like, yeah, I like where this is going, and they just get their story straight and follow through, and who knows the difference? And because the Red Ajah has done a bit of implicating himself in other bad stuff, it may be a likely enough story to work on enough people that they can manipulate some events.
Well, it definitely is a bombshell. I have a question. She says, he was found by Reds in Gheldon at least a year before he proclaimed himself, but instead of bringing him to Tarvalon to be gentled, they planted the idea in his head of claiming to be the Dragon Reborn. You were certain of this, Bayanan asked quietly in a heavy Tarabonner accent. She sat very still in her tall cane-bottomed chair, watching carefully. So Elaida picked Bayanin to go to Salidar specifically because she was ambitious, and she figured she would do the job well because of her ambition. Bayanin, like, the minute that Egwene gets captured, she leaves and goes back into the tower because she's like, well, okay, that's over. She's captured. She's not the Amyrlin anymore, so it's not a violation of my oath to leave and go back. You know, if this is done with, my ambition is going to take me. Let's shuffle this and run with it. What does Bayanin think of this? Is she changing her plans and hearing it?
That is a really good question.
I mean, I imagine all of the Aes Sedai will at least try to appear to be scandalized, whether or not they actually are.
Bayanin is a gray.
That doesn't...
And she cares about the law. And, you know, she was... You know, there's discussion about the fact that she's done a lot of work with, like, murders. She cares enough about the law that she'll, like, go sleep in barns and stuff to make sure that justice is seen in tiny little villages and things. So if she's cares about the law enough that this flagrant violation of the law, that they would set up a false dragon, you know, how does that weigh against her ambition? I'm just wondering, at this point, is she making new plans when she hears this?
Yes. It's all I got. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much she believes, how much it's hard to know what she really is thinking there.
Later on...
It's hard to understand her motivations, because if I remember correctly, isn't Bayanin one of the Aes Sedai that really tries hard to, or appears to try hard to prepare Egwene for her racing to Amyrlin's seat? Like, she's one of the main players there.
She is, and she's not Black Ajah. You know, she swore to her, and she's forced to hold to her oath when she runs into Egwene in the tower, and Egwene's like, you know, you ratted me out, you must be Black Ajah. And she's like, no, I got around my oath because I convinced myself that you aren't the Amyrlin anymore. And Egwene's like, well, you fucking scratched that. I am the Amyrlin, and this is what you're gonna do, motherfucker. You know, and so and Bayanin's like,
that's a verbatim quote, guys.
Yes, that's exactly it. And Bayanin's like, oh, shit, yeah, I guess I screwed that up. But at that point, Bayanin's also really upset because she went back to Elaida, and rather than getting a reward, despite the fact that she gives Elaida the weave for traveling and some of the other weaves, which Elaida does not pass on, Elaida, like, totally hoses her. She, like, bitches her out, she's mean to her about it, and it's basically like, you know, you're a failure, and Bayanin gives up the names of all the ferrets, and even so, Elaida is just sort of like, you're a failure, you didn't do a good job, and you let me down, and, you know, is a dick to her about it, which immediately sours Bayanin on her, and she begins to shuffle her plans again. Yeah, I really like her character. I like the fact that she gets more character development later on. She's very interesting. Knowing where she ends up and knowing that she's a mole, looking at this situation and wondering, like, what cogs in her mind are turning when she hears this, and is she seeing, okay, with this information, the mission that I've been given is basically over. Am I going to roll with it? When they start talking about Amyrlins later on, she's kind of like, oh, we're going to need somebody who's a good negotiator, you know, we're going to need to be able to do this. It really seems like she's trying to run with this and figure, you know, what to do so that she can come out on top.
I'm so glad you caught that, because I've completely missed the fact that she was a spy. I don't know how. I thought she was just someone who, like, got around her oaths later, like. But that, yeah, no, thank you so much for catching that, because that makes so much more sense to her, like, motivation and the way she's acting and her little side eye.
Yeah, and that she tries to be a dutiful spy to Elaida, and Elaida is such jerk to her that I feel like it kind of turns her right back around, although I think, if I remember right, Egwene won't really accept her after that, because she's, you know, she betrayed some serious secrets. The Little Tower's own spies, or ferrets as they call them, and the weave for traveling, which is huge. It's hard to redeem yourself after that.
Yeah, she basically is sort of like, you're going to find all of the ferrets and you're going to tell them that you ratted them out, and I don't give a shit what happens to you. This is what you're going to do, and you're going to try to do everything you can to unfuck what you did because you screwed up. You still have an oath of fealty to me, and this is what we're doing. You've got a lot to make up for. And Bayanin think that if Elaida had been good to her, she would have been able to mentally continue to tell herself that Egwene was not the Amerlin seat and that her oaths did not hold. But as it was, like, she felt hard done by, and her ambition and the fact that Egwene was such a strong personality and still so insistent, it just caught her up and she couldn't do anything about it. She's like, okay, yeah, I guess I'm still your liege Aes Sedai, and I owe fealty to you. So Painted Spook says Elaida was Elaida to her. That's accurate.
Yeah, I think we're struggling to find the words like a jerk or a dick or Elaida. Maybe the better word for that.
So Morvran asks, why did the Red Ajah set up Logain as a false dragon? And I think it's smart to not have an answer for that.
Well, I also think it was mostly the Black as working as part of the Red.
I don't either.
I don't think it was the Red specifically. I think it was the Black manipulating events on Ishmael's orders. They just used the Red as a convenient tool.
But Swan doesn't try to answer it.
To sow chaos?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems a likely story as any... Yeah, that seems likely enough.
And it gives them an opportunity to start asking themselves, well, why would they do this, and snowball and tell themselves terrible tales about the Red Ajah, because they've already got a bad taste in their mouths about them, because here they are sitting in this shitty little village in the middle of nowhere because of the behavior of one member of the Red Ajah and the rest of the Ajah's undying loyalty to her. And then Lyanna throws in the whole, oh, we're not saying they had anything to do with Mazrim Taim. We're totally saying that they totally had something to do with that. It's great to not even try to explain to them why that might happen, because it lets them tell themselves all kinds of stories, each one like worse than the last.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That to unleash the suspicion is enough. That whether or not it's true, it seems likely enough that, see what I'm getting at? That just like in a courtroom, a judge can strike it from the record that something was said, but the jury heard it.
Right.
It's still in their mind, whether you want it to be or not. It cannot be a part of the record, but now everybody's thinking, well, wait, did that happen?
It's unethical, but yeah, sure. Ethics.
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the way
when you're facing the end of the world, you do some unethical things, like make an oath to Gareth Brand and betray it.
Yeah, Swan's not super concerned about ethics at this point, which is why what she's doing is real sketchy. It's sort of like, has she already
very
decided that she wants Egwene specifically to be the Amerlin?
I don't think so. I think she's just looking for someone who she can manipulate, but Egwene has to be on the short list for her.
Now that you ask that, as far as we know, how many sisters were outside of the tower when that happened? Like, I'm sure there were quite a few, but she also, remember a book or two ago, talks about how she knows that she doesn't know who she can trust, with the exception of these couple of girls.
Point.
So maybe she's not thinking of Egwene specifically, but I think she's probably thinking of the Supergirls.
Well,
I think that may be correct.
She knows that they're not dark friends, and she's pretty sure that Rand will trust them. They're young, so she can manipulate them.
And they're very powerful as well, which is another thing that comes up in that conversation. All three are very strong in the power.
That's true. And Elaine has automatically got to be disqualified because she has to be Queen of Andor. Nynaeve's a loose cannon and too stubborn. So it's like Egwene does seem the obvious one. And it's sort of like, you can't say that Egwene is Rand's foil exactly, because a foil is supposed to make someone else look better, but like a counterpart. And I was really surprised the first time I read it through, seeing that. Like, I was not expecting that. And it was so nice. Like, it seemed like so different from what you might see of, rather than her just like being Rand's love interest. It's like, oh no, she's not actually his love interest, and she has this whole different arc that's like a parallel to him, and she counterbalances him, and because it happens a little bit later on, and it's like, you know, she's completely flabbergasted by it, I was completely flabbergasted by it. I mean, Egwene is my favorite character. Moraine's my favorite till she dies, and then Egwene takes over, and I just love her story. And I think that Siuan decided that Egwene would be the one, because she's like, this is the one that I can control and manipulate, stupidly thinking so.
In a recent episode, Seth actually brought this to light for me, that they're very much, I feel like, now that I heard Seth's pitch in a recent episode, that Rand very much represents the Fang and Egwene represents the Flame. I feel like that was the intent. Once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's almost like they're siblings rather than, you know, lovers, because there was never any chemistry there, and she was so over him, like, from the get-go.
Totally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see this sort of symbiotic connection of two godlike siblings who are supposed to be like the center that everything rotates around. I hope in the series that they'll make them all be ta'veren. Celestial twins. Daedalus says celestial twins. That's a good one. I hope that they all get to be ta'veren.
The Gemini.
Yeah, there you go. Because I was always disappointed that the girls weren't ta'veren. I thought that was kind of shitty.
I kind of was too, and you have 3 and 3, and it just seems to make sense.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Are there any female ta'veren?
No.
Doesn't that seem strange?
Aradia says fucking nodding.
Like
hard
hard.
Nodding. Head gonna fall off.
Totally, yeah. It always seemed like those three, they certainly have as much plot protection. You know, like Elaine especially, like, manages to pull off some real serious, like, okay, I'm not sure, that shouldn't have worked out for you, but I guess ta'veren. But except you don't have the excuse for her.
Not to mention Nynaeve and Egwene. I feel like it's just, yeah, it's true for all three of them.
I think ta'veren, the most brilliant idea I think that Jordan ever came up with. You know, he's like, okay, all of these things...
It's a power where shit goes your
like,
way.
all of these things are so highly unlikely, so to keep this from being totally unbelievable, I'm just going to come up with this idea that you're this thing and everything wraps around you, and that's why this stuff happens. And yeah, I thought it was the plot armor now has a mechanic.
Yeah, canonical plot armor is the best.
Yeah, it was brilliant, and, you know, I think that that's probably one of his greatest contributions to the story as a whole. Was brilliant. And yeah, I hope that all of them will be ta'veren, because I feel like it'll be better for the story, better for the times, and make more sense for Egwene balancing Rand. That's my opinion about that.
That does make me wonder at his motivations a bit, and maybe I feel like a nice way to, or a nice light to cast this in, is that the boys were little boys who needed help, but the women didn't. They did it without help.
The women could take care of their shit.
That's a valid point.
Right. And little, like, 5 foot tall Egwene, I'm sure I'm not getting that right, 5'2" or 3 or whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah, I always really enjoyed how powerful she is in will and in the power, and just the force she is in the world, kind of contrasted with how small of a human being she is. I really like that.
Buffy syndrome.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And I did like that about Buffy. She's small, and so it's almost more unreasonable that she's so strong.
Yeah. Same thing with Vin, where you've got, like, it's her, like, small size actually makes her more powerful, because it's, like, per pound or something like that.
That it's more evident. It's, like, a greater contrast that she's such a small person, but also so powerful. Forceful in personality and drive and all that. Whereas, you know, a character like Matt, like, literally trips and falls into a situation and just goes his way. Whereas I feel like the women have to spend a lot more time planning and being careful gathering information and things.
Using their brains.
Yeah, using the brains perhaps, but they're not really careful.
And they're often not careful, sort of on purpose. They're like, they've laid a trap, so let's walk into it. And that happens like 4 times.
Oh, there's a Forsaken, let's go attack him.
There's one thing they won't be expecting, for us to walk into their trap on purpose.
Uh-huh.
Take that, Shadow. I want to say that I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I want to believe, and we all acknowledge that there's no real evidence to back this up one way or the other. But I want to believe that she took a story that seemed sketchy to her and spelled it out to the Aes Sedai in a way that made it look obvious that the Reds were responsible for this, or did this and planned this by themselves. You know what I mean? Took a good story and inflated it in such a way that makes it seem worse.
I can buy that. Exaggeration rather than outright lies.
Add in a couple of details that make it seem more legit, and there you go. Serious ammunition.
That makes sense.
If I may suggest, Leanne said, it is not enough to wait until you have enough support in the hall of the tower to depose Elaida. Swan put on an interested look, as though hearing this for the first time. Elaida sits in Tar Valon, in the White Tower, and to the world she is Amyrlin. At the moment, you are only a flock of dissidents. She can call you rebels and agitators, and coming from the Amyrlin seat, the world will believe it. We can hardly stop her being Amyrlin's seat before she's deposed, Carlinia said, shifting her chair in icy contempt. Had she been wearing her white fringed shawl, she would have snapped it around her. You can give the world a true, Amyrlin. Leanne spoke not to the White Sister, but to all of them, eyeing each in turn, sure of what she was saying, yet at the same time offering a suggestion that she merely hoped they would take. It had been Swan who pointed out that the technique she employed on men could be adapted for women. I saw Aes Sedai from every Ajah, save the Red, in the common room, and in the streets. Have them elect a hall of the tower here, and let the hall select a new Amyrlin. Then you can present yourselves to the world as the true White Tower, in exile, and Elaida as a usurper, with Logain's revelations added in. Can you doubt who the nations will accept as the real Amyrlin seat? The idea took hold. Swan could see them turning it over in their minds, whatever the others thought. Only Shiriam voiced a word against. It will mean that the tower is truly broken, the green-eyed woman said sadly. It is already broken, Swan told her tartly, and instantly wished she had not when they all looked at her. So they've worked on this plan together, right? They were sitting in the foyer of the principal's office, and they were like, all right, let's get our story straight before they separate us, and we have to say what happened.
Suan's trying to learn to be diffident and failing.
Yeah. And it's a powerful moment. And that's when the seed is planted there.
The seed of Egwene.
Whether or not it's true, like I said, doesn't matter if it's true. It still has power.
So, how happy do you think Shiriam is to hear the story about Logain and the Red Ajah? Because I'm wondering how much she's struggled up to this point to keep everything together and to keep people from running back to the tower. Do you think she's just sort of like, well, damn, that made my job easier?
I do think Shiriam would think that. She is the only one that offers even a shred of resistance to the idea. I have to assume that Shiriam offers a shred of resistance to this idea so that she doesn't look like she's not resisting it, because it's perfect. It's perfect for her ends.
Well, and we know that Egwene is definitely, she's ordered to help raise Egwene up to Amyrlin's seat. The Black Ajah thinks that Egwene is going to be easily manipulatable. So she's all about the idea.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, yeah.
And I think also the sitters, and not to mention Elaida, in the actual tower, will be even more enraged and upset and kind of generally hostile if they do something like that. It's not just a group of women who walked away. It's a group of women who are purposely undermining the authority of the tower. It's perfect for Shiriam's ends.
Yes, and I'm sure Shiriam does not like Elaida. It's a slap in the face. It's kind of a dignified slap in the face in a way that just, crouching in this village is not. There's something to, taking the power back. being Aes Sedai, and rather than just getting allotments of wood and making sure there's enough food and that everybody's, got somewhere to sleep and all of the things that are very basic, and everybody's just running around and nobody's really doing Aes Sedai type things, and this is an opportunity for everybody to do Aes Sedai type things, and I feel like it's both insulting to Elaida, it's insulting to the notion of the coup in the tower, and it's empowering to everyone in Salidar.
I 100% agree. And we see in a moment, gosh, is this Shiriam's, or is this Swan?
Swan.
Okay. Now that I hear it, Leanne's idea gives you a way to build the tower again without having to tear it down completely first. It's probably important to note, nobody wants war. It will go there, obviously, or at least very close to it.
They've already had some Aes Sedai killing Aes Sedai just in the coup. That can be kind of like covered over a little bit, but to have it go back to that in retaking the tower is terrible. So, Bayonen's automatically like, we need to negotiate with the sisters remaining in the tower. So I feel like here she sees another angle, like, okay, I can take this and run with it and see if I can't get us back together this way. I also feel like, loves the tower. She's Aes Sedai in a way, and she probably doesn't care too much who's Amyrlin. So I don't think she feels any particular loyalty to Elaida. And at this point, she just wants the tower to be whole. Everybody wants the tower to be whole, except for, Shiriam and her bosses. I'm sure Shiriam even would like the tower to be whole. But Bayonen is putting herself forth a little bit. She's like, the Amyrlin we choose, she must be a skilled negotiator. And then Carlinia puts herself forth as well. And I'm almost curious whether, had either of them been chosen, would they have just been sort of like, okay, well, we're all just going to go back.
And by the way, you're doing an awesome job helping us cover particularly the super complicated word or name soup, I think, as Seth said it earlier.
Well, I mean, you get like 6 really important names added to your name soup that you kind of need to remember. I mean, you've met a couple of them already, but yeah, you get into Salidar and you meet a whole bunch of people that you need to remember, and then it's like, you get the Hall of the Tower.
Yeah, and trying to understand everybody's motivations and the motivations of their counterparts and how they're all kind of simultaneously fighting each other while working together. It's all very complicated.
And I love it, but yeah, it's like when you're first reading it through or the first couple of times, I had to start waiting for the books to come out, starting with book 5, so I did like lots of rereads, and that made it stick better, but it's a lot.
Oh, absolutely. So as they're talking, after my last read, I'll start here. If I may suggest, Swan thought she managed diffidence better than she had meekness. And skipping a little more, it seems to me that whoever you choose should be someone who is not in the tower when I was deposed. Would it not be best if the woman who unites the tower again was one whom no one could accuse of choosing a side on that day? Someone very strong in the power, Leanne added. The stronger she is, the more she can stand for all the tower means, or will again once Elaida is gone. Swan could have kicked her. That thought was supposed to wait a full day, so they've rehearsed this shit. A sister who was out of the tower, Shiriam said, nodding. That makes excellent sense, Swan. Very good. How easily they slipped into patting her on the head. And I kind of just wanted to read that because Swan and Leanne have rehearsed this entire thing. They know exactly what they're doing.
More and more, I think that they are setting up Egwene to be the Amyrlin seat.
Yeah, we don't know precisely what they're trying to do or if they already have Egwene in mind, but we do know from that little statement that talking about that bringing up the discussion point of getting a woman who was outside of the tower when the deposition happened. I don't know if I'm using that word right, but I'm going to brush right over it. This is part of their plan. Whatever their plan is or whatever the ends are, we don't know, but I think it continues to point in the direction that they have already discussed bringing in one of the probably one of the Supergirls, if not. I mean, I could think of lots of other Aes Sedai who weren't in the tower at the time, but
Ramonda, Cadsuane, there were a whole bunch of like powerful Aes Sedai who weren't in the tower at the time. It's a good idea, regardless of whether they had, a puppet already picked out.
Agreed. Yeah.
Who's Cotswain? I don't think she's appeared in this series yet.
I don't think she has.
She's a bit of a... I always wonder about that, like why she never gets mentioned before she actually appears. She really does come out of nowhere. And she seems to be in Jordan's notes from the very beginning. Just one of those things that he...
Don't a lot of Aes Sedai think she's dead?
Yeah.
Yes.
But you think they'd at least be like, oh, that dead Aes Sedai. That famous old... I don't know.
Back from retirement for the 4th time.
I mean, maybe. He's generally really good at, like, throwing people in if they're gonna show up later, or, just letting you see someone at random. But, I don't know. I mean, the first time I read Crown of Swords, I was sort of like, whoa, who is this lady? And it really threw me for a loop. So I do feel like it might have been more effective to have mentioned her.
I agree.
Even if it was just sort of like, someone, one of the Aes Sedai ruminating on her and being like, God, that lady was a headache or whatever.
There was once this woman. Yeah.
But it didn't happen, and that's... The books are almost perfect, but not totally. You can't have everything. And
No. I'm sure Jordan planned that out ahead of time in his head. And no, he doesn't make a mistake. He does not make mistakes. How dare you?
He does not make mistakes. Oh my.
The creator does not make mistakes.
Oh, you mean Bella?
The wheel weaves, and that is our reality.
Oh, is that what the cannon is for? I always wondered what the little cannon emoji was for. Now I understand. Sometimes I'm a little slow on the uptake.
Are they spelled different? Canon and canon?
I think one of them has one N and one has two, but,
Ugh, English.
I'm going to go enjoy my dessert in the desert. Speaking of the desert, the Aiel Waste is where Suian thinks that Rand is gone. And of course, she's right, as we just spent the last freaking book and a half in the Aiel Waste with him. But this is information that, as far as they know, he was last in Tyr with the sword and then vanished.
Yeah, and it hasn't been terribly long. It's probably important to note.
Right, a month, maybe two. And honestly, it's just been the time that Suian's mostly been traveling with Logain. I'm surprised she's actually able to put that together.
I think she only knows that Rand basically has disappeared, that he left Tyr, and that's almost certainly true. And nobody knows where he is, which, I mean, is a good sign that if people in the tower have no idea where he went and that he disappeared, well, he's certainly not in Tyr, where there will be eyes and ears, and that's a stable place. Suppose he could be in Cairhien or something, but even that's unlikely. The Dragon Reborn shows up, people will make note, no matter how chaotic it is there at the moment. So that it does make logical sense that he went to the Aiel Waste, but she also brings up, I read something of the Aiel when I was accepted. Katara Moroso thought that some of the Aiel Wise Ones might be able to channel, blah, 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 one of the books.
And I really want to shove Katara Moroso's name in here and point that out. She had the foretelling about Luke going to the Blight and Tigraine going to the Waste. She had the foretelling that led Suian and Moraine to seek out Rand al'Thor in the first place. And now she actually, seeded Suian with this knowledge that the Aiel are the people of the dragon. I wonder if that had something to do with the foretelling as well.
Yes, and there's another prophecy that the stone won't fall until the people of the dragon come. Mm-hmm. And if the Aiel are the people of the dragon, and we had reports of Aiel there when the stone fell, well, and now he's disappeared? No one knows where he is?
And the last we saw him, he was hanging out with Aiel. Yeah.
Solid logic.
Makes a lot of sense.
I think that, in New Spring, I think it's Morel. She kind of pops in on Swan and Moraine right after Gitara dies and wants to know how soon they think the last battle is going to be because of the Aiel, and makes some comment about Gitara having some prophecy about when the Aiel come to Tar Valon, that there will be, Tarmogoyf will happen in the next 20 years or something. I can't remember specifically how it goes. But this thing about Gitara thought that some of the Aiel wise ones could channel. I always wonder with Aes Sedai, it's like, of course some of them can channel. It's like, do you think that only people that live inside this border of Randland can channel and everywhere else, in the world they can't? It just sort of seems like they're so blinded by their sense of their own superiority and their belief in their own knowledge that the fact that they would not think that, the sea folk would be able to channel, or the people in Shara, or the Aiel wise ones, it just seems like such a duh thing. And their arrogance is sometimes you just want to slap them, because it's like, of course they can.
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that they think they're actually eliminating channeling from the populace. I think they think it's not common among people outside of Randland, and then, which they're wrong about. And then they think they're literally, they talk about breeding it out of the population. I don't think they're calling it out of the population. I just think they're not searching.
It seems counterintuitive, though, because it's sort of like all of those other places, men aren't being gentled. So it sort of seems like you would have more channeling in other populations outside of Randland. I just feel sort of like they know things that they know. They assume that they know. It's like NASA. NASA, the engineers, they're so caught up in their own intelligence that, they assume that they know things. And, I read an article saying that a lot of the accidents that happen because they assume that they couldn't happen because they know so much that, of course, these things wouldn't happen. And they were like, what happened with the Challenger, with the O-rings between the fuel rocket cells, they knew that they got brittle and broke every time that the rockets launched, but they were like, oh, well, nothing will happen about it because, nothing bad has happened before. And so because they were such brilliant engineers and all this other kind of stuff, they were just kind of like, okay, well, since nothing bad has happened now and we know what we're doing and we're all super smart, nothing bad will happen, when obviously something did, and it was just a matter of time, and they were rolling the dice every time. And I just sort of feel like Aes Sedai are kind of like NASA engineers or something and just assume that they know everything, when they really know very little in a lot of things, and they frustrate me.
I read something similar recently, or actually I think it was on a podcast, but anyway, the point is it was about the kind of evolution of the aviation checklist, and this was for commercial airline pilots who are mainly ex-military in the States, and I think in a lot of other places also. And that when the idea was first floated for a checklist to make sure that you don't make a simple mistake and kill a bunch of people, including yourself, most pilots were very resistant to the idea. They thought, I've been flying every day of my life for the last 25 years. I was trained in the military. I know what I'm doing. I don't need you to write a checklist for me. I know how to fly a plane, And that was sort of the attitude. It had to be kind of forced on them. And then once they had to do this checklist, accidents decrease significantly, because it doesn't matter how much of an expert you are.
Same thing with doctors.
You still might forget a minor detail here and there.
Doctors definitely have
the checklist.
Yeah, the checklist makes a big difference in terms of did you wash your hands, right? It's amazing how frequently doctors fail at that, not because they're not thinking, not because they don't want to or because they're being lazy. It's just the human mind doesn't remember those details. You do it
probably because they worked a 36-hour shift and then got paged by a frantic voice over a telecom to rush over somewhere. It makes sense. It's very human.
Did you check?
But you might forget this one minor detail.
Radio wants to know if you checked which side of the body you're operating on. Well, Yes, this tangent, that's what they make me think of. Is just their arrogance and their assumption about things that, can't be because they say they can't be when it should be obvious that they are. And it's just kind of like, it's frustrating. But if we could go back a second to the previous page.
No.
I do what I want. They're talking about all the different possibilities for people to put forward for the Amerlin seat. It says, Suan kept her face smooth, her smile on the inside. The breaking of the tower had changed many things, many ways of thinking besides her own. These women had led the sisters gathered here, and now they were discussing who should be presented to their new Hall of the Tower, as if that should not be the Hall's choice. It would not be difficult to bring them around ever so gently to the belief that the new Amerlin should be one who could be guided by them, and unknowing they and the Amerlin she chose for her replacement would be guided by herself. I get why she does it, and yes, we who know the whole story understand the necessity behind it, but it's just like, I feel such a fundamental, revulsion for it, because it's so just, creep-tastic when you think about how, government functions and everything, and how wrong it is, that, it's just sort of, not letting, technically the Hall of the Power isn't the people, but it's, the representatives of the people, and she's just kind of here I am manipulating the government in such a way as to kind of have this, subtle takeover, and changing the minds of these people to make them think in such a way where they will take power. Yeah, it's a little alarming, and it's Egwene is brought up as Amerlin in this school of thought almost, to the point where you kind of wonder what kind of an Amerlin she would have been after the last battle if she hadn't died. So I always found that a little bit alarming, as much as I thought it was, or I understood the necessity of it. So.
We have openly wondered about that, and I feel like, I just want to say, guys, new headcanon, Suan knew Egwene was going to be her replacement before she ever got to Salidar. And I just want to throw out there also, Suan referred to the Supergirls as her hounds. So Suan is basically saying, if I can't do it, if they won't have me back in, then I'll put my dog in office. And I will run things from behind the scenes. That's what she's doing.
I also really like the hypocriticalness of how dare these women try and run things from behind the scenes. I'm going to run things from behind the scenes.
I will run things. Yeah, they think they're running things. I am so far behind the scenes. They can't even see me. Swan's awesome.
Yeah, I like
Also, Egwene's a great choice.
Turns out.
But I do kind of, now I'm looking at it that way. So I can't do it, then I'll get one of my good hounds who's loyal to me. Then they will do it. And I'll instruct them from behind the scenes. And she refers to them that way. I'm not putting words in her mouth.
No, she does.
You will be my hound.
When she sends them after the Black Ajah, not necessarily for other things, but yeah.
And I don't mean it to be as disparaging or rude as it probably sounds, but I think that she sees it that way in one way, in some way at least. I love that, and it makes Suan seem more powerful, and she's one of my many favorites.
She's conniving and she's dangerous, and it's
Yeah.
I love her character. I love her character arc. I was devastated when she was stilled. Everything that she goes through is great. I honestly find her relationship with Gareth Bryn one of the only, believable relationships in the entire universe of the Wheel of Time. But at the same time, it's she's dangerous, and the choices that she makes are troubling, and her personality is... She's not the kind of person I'd want to be friends with. Yeah,
she's good, but she's mean. You know what I mean? She's on the right side, but you don't want to fight this woman. Channeler or not channeler.
No, and she's all about the ends justify the means.
Yeah.
And that's not always the best thing to have on your side, because you never know what if they don't? What if the ends don't justify the means?
It is very troubling. And luckily she is on the right side, because if she wasn't, I would feel a little worried for our Emmons fielders.
What do you think about? Oh man, I always wonder about Third Age Forsaken. If you'd actually converted maybe 13 or so, what characters would you pick to be Forsaken? And I always think of Suan would make an excellent Forsaken.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
Swan would be good. Nynaeve would be good. I mean, good as in terrifying.
She already kind of is, which is why, as I always say, she's one of my very favorite characters, Nynaeve. I just find her to be very believable and therefore lovable.
Yeah, I mean, of the Supergirls, it's sort of like the strength of personality. I feel like Elaine is the only one I could be friends with because she's like, politic and reasonable.
Sorry, did you just call Elaine reasonable?
Well, to a certain extent,
I see what you mean.
She's like, she wants to be, like friends, and she kind of can see every side. Yeah, I just sort of feel like, she'd be the kind of person that you could like chill with, and you wouldn't want to throttle her all the time. That's just my own personal opinion.
Certain definitions of the word, yeah. I may disagree with you there, but that's
that's all right.
I think Avienda would be the best friend. I would have a blast with Avienda.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Aradia is saying this is why Min is my fave, and I think that as well. Of the like main women in the series, if I were going to actually if I had to pick one to like date or spend a lot of time with, it would be Min, because I feel like she's like bookish and like normal to talk to, as weird of a thing as that is to say. Like all the others I'm either like intimidated by, or they're like way too intense, and like I don't think that I could handle like being Avienda's friend, for instance, or dating Avienda, for instance.
Oh yeah, that'd be scary.
Yeah. Oh Jesus.
Well, I did not say dating Avienda. I said friends with Avienda.
Well, fair enough. I'm just Daedalus is saying Brigida. Brigida's another one that if I had to pick one of the powerful women in the series to spend a lot of time with, she seems super cool. Like we could sit and swig whiskey and make jokes, and it would be fun.
But again, as a friend, like I feel like you're talking about very different properties. Someone I would want to date versus someone I would want to be friends with.
Chill and check out butts.
Yeah, I would hope that Brigida wouldn't want to date me, because that would mean I was super ugly. But, who cares? I guess, if you're dating Brigida.
Brigida and chill is pretty much what that was.
Sounds like a decent evening. I mean, I could hang out with her.
Well, I was only picking Elaine out of the three of Elaine, Nynaeve, and Egwene. Of those three, it's like I could hang out with Elaine. The other two would be a little much for me.
What of all the female characters, if you had to pick one to hang out with, or like have a drinks all night and actually sit in a room with them, who would you pick?
Like all of them?
Just for fun.
No, you can't. I mean, they all are friends, but
I feel like some wouldn't be fun. Like, I don't feel like hanging out with Swan would be very fun. I feel like she's too like dour.
I don't know. I think she pulls some pretty good pranks. She'd be a blast to fuck with somebody.
Maybe when she was younger.
A young Swan.
But I feel like...
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of Moraine, but I don't know how much fun she'd be to party with, so...
Nah. And I'm just using party as a way to say, like, who would you most want to hang out with, or...
I mean,
date, or...
Min's pretty good, but I really appreciate the Aiel sense of humor, so I like Avienda. Or Bane or Chiad might be a lot of fun, too.
Oh, yeah. Bane and Chiad, remember. It's not or. You don't get...
They come as a set.
Much to Gaul's disappointment.
I bet he's not disappointed in the end.
Consternation, maybe? Difficulty? It didn't make things easier for him, I'll say that much.
Yeah, no. But these things, what do we call that? It's not a is it a poly relation, or is that polygamy?
I mean, polygamy I feel is such an outdated term because it bases relationships in marriages. And it's like the only way you can have a polygamous relationship is if it's marriage based.
And Gaul was super butthurt because Chiad wouldn't marry him because she didn't want to give up the spear.
I guess she eventually does, though.
I don't think so. She's still Guy Shane at the end of the series. I mean, don't quote me on that. I've only read the last 3 books once, so...
So that's funny that you read the rest of it so many times, but then you only went through the final 3 once?
I only got the last 3... relatively recently. I mean, my ex, got them for me, and I read them, but I had already kind of just accepted that the series would never be finished, and so I hadn't really paid attention, and then when they did get finished, I read them and appreciated them for what they were, but, the first two, I thought A Memory of Light was amazing. I need to go back and read the two before that to, appreciate them again, but yeah, I just, had not done the massive consumption that I had done with the others. I'm in the process of rereading, though, so I'm on book 11 right now.
Are you a fast reader, or are you more of you read in incredible detail slowly? Or do you read fast, incredible detail? Because that seems to be...
It depends. I tend to retain information, particularly if I've just read over and over again, and then I'll, just pick up little bits. I also finally got the audiobook, so I'm kind of listening 2 or 3 books behind from what I've read. But I just, I'm reading them for the first time in, 10 years or something. So I read them over and over again through my teens and 20s, and then stopped reading them because I was doing other stuff. I was doing, writing of my own, and I stopped reading a lot of books because I was just kind of caught up in that. And then I kind of started listening to podcasts and figured I should start reading them again, and here I am.
Well, I'm just always so impressed by your what feels like encyclopedia knowledge of the series.
Well, it's just weird minutia that sticks in my head. I don't know. It's weird. I probably wouldn't remember important things, things that people really need to know in life, but this stuff is, cool. So, yeah.
It's brains are fascinating. Really are.
It's true.
Guys, I feel like the only thing that I have to tackle after all that stuff is basically that Warder rushes into the room and says 20 riders who look like grizzled veterans are approaching the camp.
Gareth Bryn and his troops, who are not that far behind Suian. They must have been, Suian's only been in camp for a few hours, so he must have been right on their heels.
Yeah, really close behind, but... One of the warders says 20 riders coming from the east, not white cloaks, and they're not some, bunch of boys out scouting from Amadisha or something. These...
Machine says they are armed and have the look of veterans, worth 10 times their number of younger men.
That's it. That's what I was looking for.
So, you got 20 guys running in who are worth 200 young men.
And also we see one of the warders say that... the warders seem pretty certain that Bryn's men spotted them as well. That each side knows that they're being watched, which is saying something. Warders are, if they don't want you to see them, it's pretty hard for you to see them.
Oh yeah, especially with that cloak.
Yeah, but these are Bryn's grizzled veterans. These are oftentimes who are mainly old retired men who are very seasoned.
And it's something we don't see a lot, but I kind of assume that these men are all become the generals of the White Tower Army and sort of end up training all the young people. If you've got... Gareth Bryn can't train everybody himself, but he's got 20 men to train his troops up. That's actually, you put them each in charge of a battalion, and that's a decent number of troops.
Right, and they've worked together over decades and decades, running a highly organized, very effective army. And they've fought alongside of each other for all of those years. It makes them, although that they're old men, it makes them very dangerous and formidable.
Veterans know how to stay alive, which is useful.
Right, by definition. Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
All I know is in Civ, when my troops become veterans, they become much more powerful. So clearly... That's what's going on.
Scout bonus, heal bonus. Rough Terrain 3. Sorry.
I know you played so much.
I
of
like
that
game.
Civ is awesome.
Like I always said, Civ 2 was my game. I haven't really gotten into it since then.
Oh man, it would be a learning curve,
Civ
but
3.
5 is, I think, the best. Although I still haven't played 6, and it's been out for like a long time, but I love 5. You know why he is here. Shiriam's voice was calmly certain. Both of you do, but you do not want to confront him. Enough so that you will have us kill him for you. There do be few great captains living. Nahal marked them off on gauntleted fingers. Agelmar Jagad and Davram Bashir will no leave the Blight, I think, and Pedra Neal will surely be of no use to you. If Rodel Italrod do be alive, he do be mired somewhere in what do remain of Era Doman. He raised his thick thumb, and that do leave Gareth Bryn. Do you think that we will need a great captain, then? Shiriam asked quietly. Nahel and Arenvar did not look at one another, but Swan still had the feeling that they had exchanged glances. It is your decision, Shiriam, Arenvar replied just as quietly, yours and the other sisters. But if you mean to return to the tower, we could use him. If you intend to remain here until Elaida sends for you, then not. Myrel gazed at Nahel questioningly, and he nodded. It seems that you are right, Swan, Anaya said wryly. We have not fooled the Gaiden. The question is whether he will agree to serve us, Carlinia said, and Morver nodded, adding, We must make him see our cause in such a way that he wishes to serve. It will not help us if it becomes known that we killed or imprisoned so notable a man before we have even begun. Yes, Bionin said, we must offer him the rewards that will bind him to us firmly. Shiriam turned her eyes on the two men. When Lord Bryn reaches the village, tell him nothing, but bring him to us. As soon as the door closed behind the warders, her gaze firmed. Swan recognized it, the same clear green stare that had Novice's knees knocking before a word was said. Now, you will tell us exactly why Gareth Bryn is here. There was no choice. If they caught her in even the tiniest lie, they would begin to question everything. Swan took a deep breath. We took shelter for the night in a barn near Core Springs in Andor. Bryn is the lord there, and she tells them the story.
It's super exciting.
Yeah.
Why do you think she says you must kill him? That always seemed a little extensive to me. It's just like a panic reaction?
Oh, I think it's you either have to capture him or kill him. And I feel like Swan feels like it would fly because she knows the sisters are worried about anyone knowing where they are. So if someone shows up, they either have to stay there and not be allowed to leave, or die. Those are the only two options at this point.
I also think she tried very, very hard to keep her progress from Bryn, and so having him show up, kind of, her mind kind of froze, and it was, panicked instinct of, you have to send him away or kill him, because she's basically reached all of her goals here. She's reached Salidar, she's pushed her way into the center of power, she's got them to agree that she should be in control of the eyes and ears, she's got them to agree that they're going to, like to hollow the tower and get an Amerlin, they're not going to go back to Elaida. Like, she's accomplished a great deal in the couple of hours that they've been sitting in that common room, and now he's coming here, and it's like, is he gonna ruin everything? And so she's just had this just instinctive reaction of like, he needs to fuck off right now, get rid of him. And I just think that was just absolutely reflexive on her part.
I feel like
that was fantastic.
Killed that chapter, guys. That was really fun.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?